Hey everyone, welcome to the Atavus Football Channel. I'm Jake Swilley, along with my man Scott Lawyer, and today we're going to be digging into, the two-step process of tackling, what it is, explaining more why it's so important to the tackle, maybe some of the undercoached aspects of it. First of all, Scott, how you doing today? Are you ready to get into this stuff?
Yeah, I think it's a very important topic. We're hitting the off season for us, so now we got some time to deep dive into some of our more technique focused stuff. So this is a great topic to start off with, Jake.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Again, it's kind of unique to talk about. I think everyone thinks of tackling as just the contact portion of it, but here at Avis, we see it as a two-step process. Really focusing on even the stuff before contact and how important that is, and maybe how it's undercoached in an aspect. So,
Right.
so let's kick it off with that. We see it, like we said, as a two-step process. There's pre-contact and the contact portion. So, Scott, take us through exactly what each of these aspects of the tackle are and how we look at them.
Yeah. So, like you said, two-step process, and the thing that's very interesting about this is I think a lot of the conversation and the controversy around football is the contact phase, right? Whether it be participation rates at the youth level or all the way up to the NFL level when you have the targeting and the rules and all that stuff. So the contact is quite, is the focus right now, the last you know, 5 to 7 years. But for us, we really think that it starts much beyond that, and it's the pre-contact. So for us, tracking and having good controlled movement to maximize, shoulder contact. That's the biggest thing for us. Body on body contact, preferably shoulder contact. And then when it comes to the contact phase, is more about making dominant tacklers through, having a good strike, good punch, hitting within the strike zone, so safe but also effective and dominant and physical. So that's really, in a nutshell, what we're trying to do with this two-step process.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can't have one without the other, right? I think you have
Exactly.
to be good at pre-contact to set yourself up for being good in contact as well. So kind of go hand in hand with each other. Let's talk about the first part, that first phase, the pre-contact phase, and we break it down into multiple zones, and then also a couple elements within each one of those zones, and the important things that we are focusing on in each of those aspects. So talk us through now how pre-contact works and how we look at it and how it happens through the tackler's mind and actions.
Yeah. So here we have our kind of our different zones for the pre-contact phase, and we'll kind of hit them all at one, all sequentially as it's in order. But the evaluation zone is very important to us because that's where the player basically identifies himself in the play and begins to close space. Some key elements that we look for are visual cues that the runner is on the balls of his feet, limiting the runner's options, and really being aggressive to the ball carrier. Next, as we enter the decision-making zone, very important when it comes to that leverage element. So having a good path, a good angle into contact, but also tracking the near hip for shoulder contact. And there's a lot of conversation, Jake. You always get this question about, are we used to, is why do we say the head behind versus in front? And really, we started to shift from not really focusing so much on where the head is because we talk about using using the leverage point of the runner as their near hip and tracking that. If you're tracking the near hip of the runner, and you're gonna be making near shoulder contact, which is gonna place your head behind, staying, as one of my coaches always used to say, inside in front of your man. Same thing, tracking the near hip and not over pursuing. Then lastly, is, as we all know, is probably the most undercoached portion in the pre-contact is the footwork. Really important when it comes to maximizing that power and that momentum through having a good shoulder width base, but also what we call a power step. So being on the balls of your feet, really being explosive in the contact. And as you can see here, for our audience, everything in the pre-contact phase is sequential. And what we mean by that is, in order to have good footwork, you must close space, have good angle, right? So everything sequentially works off each other to maximize body-on-body contact.
No, that's a great explanation. The one thing I want to point out again and reiterate, I think that you made a great point of is we talk about wanting to keep the head out of the tackle, right, and keeping the what it looks like as appearance visually is the head behind the runner, and that keeps the head out of a contact and out of the tackle. But again, we don't focus on teaching players and coaches and programs and using that language of keep your head behind. We focus on striking with the near shoulder and targeting the near hip as we go into contact. And I think those are the key points that you mentioned that we like to focus on. That will lead to the goal outcome that we want, getting the head out of the tackle. So let's take now just a visual example. Walk us through this video clip here. of the pre-contact phase of things.
Okay, yeah, I love this clip. So here you're going to see a nice, great job of tracking by this linebacker in open space. Pretty good structure in the defense. I mean, he's not like his one-on-one open field, but there's still some ability that if he doesn't do these things, that the guy can go for another 20 yards. So first off, he closes space and he limits what we call preventable yards. So basically the distance between the runner and defender when he starts to close space, we just want him to reduce that about 50%, which you see in this example, he does that to a T. Now, what's really interesting about this is a talk in this end zone copy, Jake, is you're going to see here the near hip leverage element. So that first guy misses D line, but the linebacker, we've seen this result in so many different outcomes, right? A complete whiff, it could be a shoulder contact, but he misses. But here, by him tracking the near hip, although he almost over pursues, he's able to stay square with the runner and simply just switch his shoulder and his aim point. It makes a really good, effective open field tackle. So, all in all, that is a great illustration of what we're looking for in terms of maximizing shoulder contact, but also tracking in open space.
Exactly. So real quick, Scott, let's wrap it up for us. What are reiterate the main things we're looking at when it comes to pre-contact and why it's important?
Yeah. So as you said, biggest thing here is everything is sequential. First off, we want to close space. Very important that we do that. I call it the Steph Curry analogy, right? Steph Curry, he might come out the gate, he might miss the first 2 or 3, but what is he going to keep on doing, Jake? He's going to keep on shooting. It's the same thing in closing space. We want you to, have what we call a disruptive miss, if anything, meaning that if you're closing space, you're limiting the runner's options and at least helping the structure of your defense. So that's very critical. Next is the leverage component, targeting for good shoulder contact through good angles, tracking in your hip. And then lastly, we talked about the footwork, which is all in the action zone, where we want to maximize force and momentum into contact through, having a good footwork, but also proper strike timing as well.
Yep, no, exactly. Agree 100%. I think it's, like I said, the key things here again, sequential order, making sure you have to be good at, each step in the process before you can be better than the next. You got to be good at closing space before you can be good at leverage and footwork as well. And within that, you said one of the most undercoached aspects is probably footwork. And within that, there's the bridge. It's footwork, but it's a bridge between pre-contact and contact, which is what we call strike timing. And we'll go over that more in another video because that requires a whole nother video in itself that a lot of people probably, you talk about strike timing, maybe aren't as familiar with that term and that aspect of the tackle. So we'll get into that in another episode, but just some key things to remember as part of the pre-contact phase. Now let's go to the next part of the tackle, which is the contact, the piece that people are more familiar with. Obviously, being, like you said, it's being brought the attention. The first thing people think about when tackling is the contact phase. So similar to what we discussed and how we discussed when we were talking about pre-contact, go through it for us, the elements that we look at and the main components of the contact phase.
Yeah, so the contact phase is a little bit more self-explanatory, but still some things that we have to hit on. So first off, it all starts with great body position. The reason why is because we want to maximize power and also safety into contact. So that's everything from our strike zone to also maintaining a neutral neck versus, head down, or what we call a descending plane versus we want to be ascending, striking on the rise, right? Taking off into contact. Those are all things we look for in terms of good body position. And then the strike is all about the near shoulder contact, maximizing primary shoulder contact, but also the slight nuance of what we call the jab punch, right? So not a swinging motion or the grabbing cloth that we used to be taught back in the Pop Warner in high school, but aggressive loaded jab punch, almost like Bruce Lee, going deep into the runner's body to really maximize that grip and that limit those yards after contact. And then lastly is the finish is all about maintaining those two things we talked about. So maintaining power through aggressive leg drive for 1 to 2 hard steps in the ground, and then to maintain control, we want to have an aggressive wrap and squeeze where we take the air out of the ball carrier and maintain that control to the ground or the completion of the play. Last thing here is that everything here is simultaneous versus in pre-contact it was more sequential. Here we're looking at simultaneous contact, all one dominant, violent, but effective and safe contact is what we're looking for, all happening at once.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the key piece here. I think a lot of these people are familiar with before we talk about body position and strike, but we're gonna have more videos on where we get into more of the details. of each of these elements. I think the strike in particular is an interesting one to get into as we move down the line. But the differentiation between pre-contact and contact being this, and contact being simultaneous, where all these elements have to work together at once to really make an impact, dominate contact, and make an effective tackle. So like last time, let's get into a video example here. Just walk us through again what this is looking like for us as we go into the contact phase.
Yeah, so you can see here kind of what we call our strike timing drill, but does a great job of highlighting what we're talking about. So first off, that strike zone, so hitting right below the shoulder pecs of the runner to above the knees. Now this is going to be this is going to vary amongst different athletes, but for the most part, that's our general aiming point. So also there you see that aggressive jab punch really getting really deep into the runner, and then the last part is that hooking into the leg, which is going to maximize that control, and also the leg drive, which helps limit yards after contact and dominate the runner.
Exactly. Let's just close up then with the the follow up conclusion of contact again as we kind of walk through it here as we have it. So again, everything's happening simultaneously. You'll see all three of these things working together once we get in contact. But Scott, in your eye, just wrap it up for us. The main things here and why the contact phase is important as well.
Yeah, very critical when it comes to dominating contact. Body position to maximize power and safety. So again, having a good body profile, seeing what you're hitting. Next is going to be the strike to maximize both power and control, which those two elements are very critical to what we teach here at Atavus, whether it be our drill work, but also our philosophy as well and our analytics. And then lastly is the finish to maintain power and control. So all those things are very critical when it comes to dominating contact.
Absolutely. So to close up, there's one final thing. Now that we've introduced the two-step process, and I think this is a question we get from time to time as well of, when we start working with programs, which phase do we need to work on more, or which phase is more important, or questions along like that. And so, Scott, in your opinion, I know we each have, we have our own view, but, tell us from your view and from, the way we teach things at Atavus, based on your experiences as well, which phase is maybe the most important or most undercoached in a sense? Take it as that question as you want, between pre-contact and contact, or what would be the more focal point you would use going forward?
That's a tough question. I've gone back and forth with a bunch of people on this. As you know, back in the day, we used to always think, it was, pre-contact, and some people thought it was contact. And it kind of varies, I would say, amongst the age group. If I had to say in a general sense, Jake, I would say contact, honestly, is more critical because it really does it does take that more of that muscle memory in terms of, having that shoulder contact, but the slight nuance of the punch that I talked about. The punch is the biggest thing I feel like that takes a lot of times for athletes to really maximize that and learn that subtle technique. I feel like with the pre-contact, this is going to be, as you get increased in terms of the level of competition and this, better athletes, yes, they're going to kind of separate themselves. But most kids can kind of learn closing space, although it's very hard. They can learn how to be, take their shot and being aggressive at least. And they might, learn that, okay, I close space and I take good angles, but when I make contact, my footwork is poor, right? That's a little bit easier, but at least you're maximizing contact when you're doing those first two things in the pre-contact. So I think the contact, although it seems more self-explanatory, I would have to lean more towards that contact phase because it really does embody not only the power and the control element, but also the safety, which is so important at all levels.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. I think as a whole, as a foundation of everything, contact's more important because, like I said, you can still get there if you're the defender, but once you get into contact, there's some really important elements with the strike in particular, and finishing to make sure that you secure the runner and then limit the yards after contact.
Sorry, I'm gonna mean to cut you off, but you bring up a great point because it's what helps finishes the job, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're talking about the longevity of the game, I missed this point, but the longevity is, you can have guys that close space like no other. But what if they're just launching and throwing their body and going head first every time, like heat-seeking missiles? That's not sustainable. So
You
that
see that a
was a
lot today
great point you
in the
just
game.
made. That I'm thinking now even more in the contact is that it really does help finish the job, and it helps preserve the game in a sense.
Yeah, the other thing you reminded me of too, that when we're differentiating and thinking which is more important and crucial, you said it based on age group, which I think is, or it can be based on age group, which I think is critical as well. The other thing I was thinking of once you said that was, now I think it also depends on position group to an
Mm,
extent. If you're
yes,
a defensive lineman, you don't have a lot of space between you and the runner in general, right? Just get off
great
the
point.
block and you're right in the contact phase. So,
Great
and a
point.
lot can probably be said for most around, mostly about linebackers too, especially if you play in the box, right? You don't have a ton of room or a ton of space. You have to close and stuff like that. You really just got to get to the guy in a confined area and, you know, be effective at contact. But for me, I was a DB and a safety back in the day. I think the higher you go in levels, go high school, college, and NFL and whatnot, I think the pre-contact for at least that position group becomes even more important, because now you're working with anywhere from 10 to 15, even 20 yards of space that you have to close, and working around other obstacles and things. And I think a lot of the big plays you see are due to pre-contact issues. You see near hip issues or angle issues and leverage that lead to the big plays with the runners out of the gate. And so
Right.
I think as you move, depending on the position group, especially for DBs, the pre-contact becomes even more important to focus on, because in order to, like you said, you can still fly down to the runner, but if
Yes.
you got to get to the runner in good position and set yourself up for the good contact phase, so you're not launching yourself or sitting on your heels and catching the runner and those sorts of things. But no, I agree with you 100% that the contact phase as a whole, among all position groups and all ages and all levels within the game, is the most crucial part of the tackle. So um, thank you all for watching this video. Again, if you enjoyed what you saw, please like, subscribe, and comment. Let us know some other parts of the tackle aspect that you would like to see or have questions on, or let us know if this any new information or anything you liked about what you saw in this video. We got plenty of content coming down the line with more in-depth details and
Yes.
insights on our tackling system, and maybe some nuances that you haven't heard yet. Yep, looking to hearing back from you guys. Stay tuned for upcoming insights and episodes. Until next time, we're out.